Yo! Welcome back to One More Mana. My name's Derek, and as you can see today, we're getting back into the Deck Doctor series, and this is Deck Doctor number 2, and we're going to be taking a look at another one of our patrons' decks. This week, we're looking at one of our patron, David's decks, and we're looking at his Korlash Heir to Blackblade. This deck is awesome. So he sent us some information and kind of like how he likes to see it played, so I will kind of reference that throughout the video, but overall, this looks like an awesome deck. So Korlash is a commander you don't really see very often at all. Korlash has the ability where his power and toughness are both equal to the number of swamps you control, which is obviously kind of awesome in a mono black deck. For 4 mana, you could have something with a whole lot of power, and it has the ability for 2 mana to regenerate it. So it can be a pretty, resilient general, something that is tough to kill. Now, obviously, that last ability, there's a cycle of these creatures where you can discard another card. That part's not going to come up. Well, I love so many things about this deck, though. One, like I said, this is not a common commander. And I love when people take, especially older commanders, and breathe some new life into them and give their own take. The other thing I love about this deck is how on theme it is. This is a zombie deck through and through. David made the point where he wants every creature in the deck to be a zombie regardless, even leaving out a monster like Grave Titan because it itself is not a zombie. And I appreciate that so much. If you guys watch, you know how much I love being on theme, and to be that dedicated to have everything being a zombie is awesome. Another thing I love about this deck is the general itself is just part of the zombie horde. The deck looks like it's going to just function just fine if you can't get your general out or if the general gets taxed out. It's just an awesome zombie deck whose general happens to be what can be a giant, just smashing face zombie, which is so cool. I love decks that don't rely on the general. You can play this deck in a lot of ways. The deck seems awesome. So right away, going into the deck doctor thing, looking at its health, this is a super healthy deck. This thing is, you have mentioned, David, that it is a pretty consistent deck, and I can tell it has everything you want. It has the ramp, the removal, the card draw, all those different aspects of a deck that you need. There's just a few areas I want to tweak that I think can help some of the small weaknesses of the deck, just to help guard against some of the things that Mono Black isn't great at, and some of the things you specifically had stated. So first, we're going to take a look at the creatures and what I kind of wanted to add to the creature base. Obviously, zombies, awesome. I love the zombies. David mentioned that sometimes you can get overwhelmed with too many creatures, and I think one of the best ways to combat this, especially with some of the effects you have in here that care about your zombies, is just make more zombies. Make tons of zombies, and some of the creatures that I wanted to add do a great job of just swarming with zombie tokens. The number one card I think that does that is Newscraft Mob. Newscraft Mob is awesome. It's a zombie itself. It creates tons of zombies, and the value you get for that 6 mana, you get so many zombies that flood the board. It's a resilient creature because it splits itself into this little zombie army. I think this is the type of card that in this deck would fit great because you're going to get that value off of that 6 mana, and over the course of turns, it's going to spread into that little zombie army. Speaking of zombie armies, because you have all these zombies, you have tons of zombie synergy, but I feel like there's a couple cards that I really felt like would do great in this deck to add a little bit more payoff for having so many zombies. Shepherd of Rot and Vengeful Dead both do a great job of this. In the case of Shepherd of Rot, you just tap it, just drain everyone for how many zombies you have, and all of a sudden that zombie army doesn't even need to attack to get in. And then with Vengeful Dead, instead of tapping it, it's just whenever a zombie dies, you're draining everyone. This is so awesome. The first one is just a huge payoff for having a bunch of zombies without having to attack, because there are those times where someone might have a Glacial Chasm, something attacking might not be the best way to go. Both of these do a phenomenal job of getting around stuff like that. And in the case of Vengeful Dead, it's good board wipe protection, because if someone does board wipe when you get all those zombies out, all of a sudden you're just draining everyone for a lot of life. And in a deck like this with so many creatures, and where you can really refill your board pretty easily, getting everybody just down a whole chunk of life, it could be scary for them, and it actually make them hesitate from just doing a full-on board wipe. Another zombie that I think would be a huge just payoff type card in this deck is Unbreathing Horde. It only costs 3 mana, which is just dumb. But when it enters, it gets a +1 counter for each zombie you control, any zombie in your graveyard. So this is any zombies you've played throughout the course of the game are all going to be payoff for this, and it just floods it with +1 counters. And not to mention, if it would take damage, you just remove a single +1 counter from it. It's just a huge zombie body that you can smack people with, and if someone chump blocks it, remove 1 +1 counter. That's ridiculous. That's insane. Even if they have a huge creature, this thing will stick around, and it can be really annoying to deal with. And like you said, if people are playing those type of decks with lots of creatures, this is something great to have at its worst. It's a huge blocker to protect yourself from swing back. Looking at the enchantments, you have a couple reanimation effects. I would actually consider cutting one of those, possibly Animate Dead, just because this is a really low to the ground deck. The CMC is pretty low, And that's awesome. That means it's going to run consistently, but there's not anything really huge you want to cheat out with these reanimate effects. I'm not saying they're bad by any means, but I think a card like Endless Ranks of the Dead may fit better, just because every upkeep, you're just going to be able to flood zombie tokens out onto the board, and that gradual value you're going to get throughout the game, if no one gets rid of this, you could just end up with just tons and tons of zombies growing this huge army with all this zombie power on board. And I think in this type of deck, the way I see it at least, it does seem like flooding with zombies is going to be more beneficial to you than reanimating something that has been killed, because, I mean, you have a lot of just creatures that come back on their own in the deck. There's not really a big cheat into play payoff for it, so I think Endless Ranks might fit better in that slot. Looking at the sorceries, another 1-to-1 swap I think that would do great is, instead of running Living Death, I think Zombie Apocalypse might be what you want. Living Death is a great card, and I love it. I do run it in a lot of decks. The only thing is there's a lot of graveyard decks now, and it gets kind of scary. If you're not a dedicated mill deck where you're filling your graveyard with creatures, there's a lot of games where Living Death can benefit your opponents more than it's going to benefit you. And that can be scary. I like to run cards. If it benefits everyone, I'm not mad. I just want to know I'm getting the most benefit. And having a card like this that can benefit an opponent, that's scary. I see lots of Muldrotha decks, lots of Marin decks, so many graveyard synergizing decks that, yeah, it can get scary if you don't know, and there's not enough mill, I think, to warrant a card like that. If you're having fun with it, obviously leave it. But I think Zombie Apocalypse, one, obviously super on theme, but bringing all your zombies back is just an awesome effect. It's the type of deal where obviously you're not self-milling, but you know, if you're in a situation where you didn't fill your graveyard, you won't want to cast it, but you wouldn't really want to cast Living Death either, because you're giving benefit to the opponents. At least with Zombie Apocalypse, it's only going to benefit you if you're in a spot where you have zombies in the graveyard. And speaking of Zombie Apocalypses in this sorcery slot, Army of the Damned, this is not going to help the deck run any more efficiently. In all honesty, I think the cards you have slotted are all around better for it, but just as a flavor win, it's one of those things that I love running this card in zombie-ish decks, because just the feeling of just throwing 13 zombies out, it feels so good. I love it. So that's something to consider. I'm sure you've thought about this card. I'm sure you're aware of the card. But if you're ever in a situation where you want a big, dumb card, this is one of the biggest, dumbest cards, and in a zombie deck, the payoff's actually pretty good. So it's something to consider, you know, depending on how hard you want to go into just Zombie Apocalypse theme. Now, we're going to continue with the sorceries, but I want to take a brief pause and talk about the number one thing I wanted to add to this deck. Now, obviously, some token swarm stuff and some payoff for having all those zombies was the thing I thought could, definitely help late game with some more payoff. But I think the number one thing, and you mentioned this, is you do need, and I mentioned this before, all your vitals are looking great, everything's looking good, but you are suffering from a case of lowly diversified removal. I don't even think that's correct English, but I'm going to say it like that way anyway. That wasn't correct. I can't speak. So we need to go ahead and pump up that diversified removal, get the last vital sign to a healthy level. And I think this deck is going to be looking great. And really, the way to do that, and it's so hard in mono black. Mono black is just so tough. You have tons of creature removal. And I love that. There's lots of single targeted removal. I love running lots of removal like that, especially in a deck like this. You mentioned you can answer threats and make sure you keep your zombie army out and answer the big threats that would hurt you. That's awesome. But there are going to be certain enchantments and artifacts and stuff like that are just going to, if they don't shut your deck down, put you in a terrible spot. If someone drops a propaganda, what are you supposed to do? If someone drops some stacks cards, you don't want to be in a position where you just can't play. So starting in the sorcery slot and then going into the other categories, there are quite a few cards that I think would be great in this deck to add some removal to deal with some more diverse situations than just creature removal. Since we're in the sorcery slot, I will mention this. I don't think this is ideal by any means, but depending on your meta, this might be a good card. And it's cards like Thoughtseize, where you get to look at opponents' hands and put cards into the graveyard. Now, this is literally only if you have a very close-knit meta and you know what other people are playing. This is a great card. If you have a turn where you think you're getting close to going off, you can pick the player who you know. They might be playing that propaganda, or they might be playing that Winter Orb, whatever that card might be that's going to shut your deck down, that's an artifact, enchantment that you might not have other ways to deal with. This is a great card just to hold in hand, and then when you think you're about to go off, you can search who you think has that card and get rid of it, or if you think they have a counter spell or anything like that. And it's cheap to cast too. It's 1 mana, so it's the type of deal where if you know your meta well, this is a great way to preemptively deal with those problem enchantments that Mono Black really doesn't have a good way to deal with once they hit the battlefield. Looking at the artifacts, I'm going to continue that theme. Again, you said this deck is consistent and it looks really well built, and I think we should really go all in revamping that removal package. And in artifacts, a card like Oblivion Stone is amazing. This gives you the chance to basically put a fake counter on your commander if you want and just blow everything up. And if you have a bunch of swamps, you can end up with this just massive commander and nothing else on the board. it's an awesome card. And it does, again, you get rid of non-land permanents. Anything that's going to get rid of all non-land permanents is just amazing in a mono black deck that struggles so hard with it. Whether you're running O-Stone or a Nev's Disc, anything like that will fit great in this slot. It is a board wipe, and I realize a lot of the time this deck does seem like it wants to do targeted creature removal instead of just wiping everything. But in certain circumstances, it might be better to just, push the reset button rather than having to stick with these artifacts and enchantments that are just slowing the deck down too much. These next two cards are going to be, they're super inefficient. And really the next few cards I'm going to talk about in general are very inefficient mana-wise, but it has the magic words of getting rid of a target permanent. And in mono black, it's one of those things where mono black ramps pretty hard. It's going to be worth it. If you have to spend a few extra mana to be able to get rid of anything in those games where they get those problem enchantments out, you're going to feel great having this in hand, knowing you can deal with it. And in the artifact slot, Spine of Ishsaw and Universal Solvent do it perfectly. Now, if you are in a meta with lots of artifact and enchantments and you need that artifact enchantment hate, you know what? You might want to put both. I feel like just one would be enough, but Spine of Ishsaw I think is the best one because when it does get destroyed, it does come back. It can be reusable. There's not really a ton of artifact stack outlets in here, so it's not going to be reusable in that sense. But someone board wipes, all of a sudden you get that back, and you get to just play it again. And being able to have the option, basically to have repeatable permanent removal in mono black, that is amazing. And that's the type of card where, again, it's inefficient and it looks ridiculous that it's going to be 7 mana. But in that situation in a game where you're about to try to win, that might be worth it to get rid of that card that you otherwise wouldn't have a way to deal with. And it does say permanent. So, lands, this is a great way to be dealing with problems if they have a Glacial Chasm. I mentioned that card quite a few times. If they have someone's playing a Cradle, something crazy, you can get rid of it with a card like this. And looking at the instance, really the one thing I would change is going to be the same thing. Scour from Existence, and that is in that same category as the last few cards. I actually do prefer Scour from Existence to any of the other previous ones because it is an instant speed. So in a deck like this, you can hold up mana and do this at any point in time. You don't have to tap out on your turn and do it. Obviously, mono black's not doing a ton of instant speed shenanigans, but I always do feel better using that much mana for removal. I always feel better having it at instant speed, being able to use it at the exact moment I need to. So Scour from Existence is great. Really, the way I see it, I would put at least 3 of those in there. If it were me, I would put Scour from Existence, I would put Spine of Ishsaw, and then either Nev's Disc or Oblivion Stone in there. Because having that much removal in a deck like this is going to make you feel so good because you're going to have your zombies be able to play your threats, and you're always going to have something in hand to deal with the threat right back. And in a deck like this, it's the type of deck I love. It's not trying to combo off. It's not trying to do anything like that. When you have these very flavorful and kind of awesome synergizing decks, you need lots of removal and lots of answers because other people might not be playing that same way. Other people might be trying to either shut the board down or combo off. And this just hugely diverse removal, being able to destroy permanents, exile permanents in the case of Scour from Existence, it is so super necessary in a deck like this. And mono black, limited options, but I think these do a great job of opening it up, especially with Scour. It exiles, so even indestructible stuff like that, you can deal with it. Someone gets that Xenagos out, this deals with it. So this is the type of thing where I hugely recommend slotting these cards in there. Your land base looks good. I am so happy to see you're someone who runs at least 37 lands. It stresses me out so much when people are running 32, 33 lands. And even though you have a low curve, which again, I love to see that low mana curve, you're still running 37 lands. And that makes me so happy. So that is awesome. The only card I might recommend is Cabal Stronghold. Obviously, it's not as good. You have the coffers in there, which is way better. But in a deck running as many swamps as you are, I run Cabal Stronghold. One, it's a pretty cheap card. I run it in my mono black decks. And every once in a while, you get that big payoff. Worst case, an extra colorless mana in a deck that has this many swamps and is running Urborg really won't hurt you that much. So that's going to do it for the categories. Obviously, with the Deck Doctor series, I've always wanted to do, the number one things you need, what I'm going to prescribe to you to get this deck healthy. This deck is pretty healthy itself. So I really think I'm going to go ahead and do those top 3 cards, stuff I already talked about, as far as the level of importance I see to get it healthy. But like I said, it's in a good spot. So number 3, we're going to have to go with Endless Ranks of the Dead. I love this card so much in this deck. Just to be able to play this card and turn after turn, have your zombies out, and be able to continue to fill the board with zombies. The number one benefit for that is if someone is playing a Token Swarm type deck, you're going to have chump blockers, which is amazing. And being able to deal with that in this deck and not just having to pick them off one by one, but having that little army to protect yourself is awesome. And at number 2, we are going to go with O-Stone. O-Stone, I just love so much in this deck. The ability to wipe the board and protect your commander, potentially, so you could just have a big, just beating zombie on the battlefield with nothing else left is amazing. I can see this deck maybe running into some trouble against Enchantress-type decks, which Mono Black does in general, and a card like O-Stone will help you be able to deal with those situations. And the number one card to make this deck even healthier that I'm going to prescribe it is Scour from Existence. I've mentioned this, already talked enough about it, but if anything could be added, that is the number one card. Instant speed, exile a permanent. It's perfect for what this deck needs. I understand it's a lot of mana, but your mana curve is already so low. Having something like this hurts a type of deck like this even less. But yeah, I love the deck. I love how it seems like it has some pretty straightforward win cons. You know, like you said, beat face with your commander. The zombie synergies they kind of handle themselves. Crazy stuff happens. You're going to have basically turns you can swing out and murder people with your zombies, which is awesome. So you're going to win like that. You can win with beating face with zombies. I did add some of the drain effects with, benefiting from all the zombies. I think that'll help maybe in some grindier games get you there. And obviously a card like Torment Hellfire is awesome. You can always run a Nick Sang 1/8 if you found that you were getting in some grindier games and weren't just getting that, kill shot that you need. But usually with those type of X spells, you only need one. If you do slot into, it's not bad. But yeah, I love this deck. David, I think this deck is so awesome. Your deck building skills clearly didn't need much help, but I appreciate you coming to me anyway. I hope these suggestions were good. I really hope you like them. Let me know what you think. Like I said, I'm going to have the before and after deck list posted below. And let me know what you guys think. If you have some suggestions for David that you think might help, specifically, in the case of removal or dealing with those swarm decks, definitely let me know. But yes, again, this makes me so happy. I love this series so much, and I can't wait to move forward with it. We're going to have some more deck doctors definitely coming soon. Next week, we'll be another deck tech. We are finally, I know I've been slow with it. We're getting into Throne of Eldraine. There's some crazy stuff coming, so look forward to it. And I teased it before, I'm teasing it again. Gameplay videos are coming. We got the setup. We're getting everything going. I might be more excited than you guys. I cannot wait. Clearly, I do this so much. I love playing Magic, so being able to play Magic and get it on film and for you guys to be able to see some of the ridiculousness that goes on with our play group, I am so excited to share it. But yes, lots of exciting stuff to come. But until then, I'll see you guys next time.